Alrighty, so let's do an updated guide to Fury. Mainly Fury for raid, for rotation and all that kind of stuff. What I'll do, since things have been kind of updated recently and what we use kind of has changed within the past couple weeks, is this video, what it's going to be is Fury Slayer, single target, and AoE. The AoE can be used for both raid and Mythic Plus. However, I will be doing a completely different video. The next one should be specifically about Mountain Thane, just because Mountain Thane's kind of weird, and I feel like this thing's going to be long enough as is. So, getting into the video, I'm also going to structure it differently than other things. Essentially, how I'm going to structure it is kind of like this, where we're going to talk about the opener. We're going to do the priority system, a rotation priority, and then some advanced things. Mainly because what I want this to be is accessible and kind of good for everybody. So we're going to basically focus on the basics, then I'll talk about advanced stuff about the spec, and then we'll go to the next talent tree. So it'll be single target and then AoE. But I feel like spreading it out that way can make people just starting to learn it a little less confusing, because there is some intricacies to it if you want to like min-max it. But to get like, I'd say 90% or like 95% of the value out of it, you can just follow how to play it with the simple part of the guide, and then the advanced part can like let you get that extra kind of 5% to push you a little further once you feel like you've got a hold of the basics. But without further ado, let's get into it. There is a couple notable changes. Mainly this talent here. Most guides still have Opportunist being the primary thing that we run. This music is too loud. I'm turning it down. But this is since flipped over to Fierce Follow-Through. The reason being, because of the amount of Bloodthirst we're sending out through Unhinged, we're running Reckless Abandon, so we get the Crushing Blow and Bloodbath from that, which also is buffed by Fierce Follow-Through. On top of, since for single target we run 2 points in Vicious Contempt, that's also even more value for Fierce Follow-Through, and that was even before they buffed Bloodthirst and Bloodbath an additional 20%. So, we are no longer running Opportunist. We are currently running Fierce Follow-Through for our full single target build. For single target, they did nerf Coaling Cyclone, but because it's pure single target, 10% bonus damage to our Bladestorm is better than Brutal Finish. Brutal Finish is better in AoE, but we will get to that when we talk about the AoE stuff. So, what is our opener? The most important thing about Fury Warrior is basically staying enraged, because while we're enraged, we use our Mastery, and our Mastery gives us a flat damage percent on top of everything else. So staying enraged means that we just do X amount more damage, and that's just good. That's plainly, it's good. So what is our opener? I'm gonna say, man, I just need to chill with that, because I'm gonna say that a bunch if I keep up with that shit. Our opener is going to be Recklessness into Charge. One thing to note about this is that if you Recklessness before the boss is pulled, like if you're doing a boss encounter and you Recklessness before the boss is pulled, because of Reckless Abandon, when you wreck, you get 50 Rage, and then when you charge, you'll get another 40 Rage, allowing us to Rampage instantly at the start of an encounter because of our Rage generation. But if you Recklessness before the boss gets pulled, when you start an encounter, to make things fair, what the devs have done is it reduces all of your resources and stuff to 0. So you'll just lose that 50 Rage if you wreck too early. So our opener will be Recklessness, Charge, Rampage, using all of our cooldowns into Bladestorm, Crushing Blow, Rampage, Crushing Blow, Bloodbath, and then we'll go into our normal priority. It'll look a little something like this. And then from here, we're just into our normal rotation priority. Now, how I've decided to try and do this is I've set up what I say is my priority system, right? So if you're just starting playing, these are the things you should focus on that will help you improve in the class, and how basically as you're focusing on these, you'll just start doing them naturally, right? As you practice them, as you keep your mind on it. It's kind of like when you want to practice something or when you want to get better at something, you're constantly thinking about, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. But eventually over time, that becomes automatic, and then you can focus on other things since you're just kind of doing that passively. So first and foremost, staying enraged. Like I said, our mastery means we do more bonus damage. That is good. Use cooldowns if they won't be wasted. So what do I mean by that? That means that when you pop your cooldowns, if you are able to stay on the boss and hit it for the duration of your cooldowns, you should do that. There isn't... the one example I can give you, at least early on in the raid, is this boss, Juggernat. So after we pop our first set of cooldowns, our cooldowns come back before he does his first shattering sweep, right? He does a big AoE, you have to run away from the boss. So if you pop your cooldowns before you have to run away from the boss on the first shattering sweep, you're gonna run out of like half the duration of your cooldown before you can even get back on the boss. So what I mean by use cooldowns if they won't be wasted basically means that if you're in the pack, if you're fighting, if you're on the boss, if you use your cooldowns and you can stay on the boss and hit them and have all of your stuff benefit from these damage bonuses, then use them as soon as possible. Otherwise, you want to make sure that you get a full value out of your cooldown. So, for example, if a big mechanic is coming up, if something that might make you run away from the boss is coming up, just let those couple seconds happen. See if you get the mechanic, see if you have to run away from the boss, see if you get targeted by... like also on Juggernat, the charges where you can't put the clones to go close together. See if you don't get targeted by those things, then pop your cooldowns. Those extra couple of seconds will be worth way more damage to you than sending your stuff and then having to get off the boss. It'll just feel really bad too. So we want to play smart. The next priority is making sure you cast Crushing Blow and Bloodbath before Rampage. There's a few reasons for this. Mainly that Crushing Blow and Bloodbath do a lot of damage, but the reason you want to cast both of them before going into your Rampage is because of our tier set. Whenever we Bloodthirst or Bloodbath, the damage of our next Rampage is increased by 50%. So between every single Rampage that we cast, we want to make sure that we're at least hitting Bloodthirst once. So the kind of flow that you kind of get into is you will Rampage, Crushing Blow, Bloodbath, Raging Blow, and then Rampage again. That's kind of the general flow. Like, if you run out of charges, you can send Rampage early. But that's basically the general flow we're kind of looking at in combat, right? At least at the base level. And here is our rotational priority, right? If you can press any of these buttons, these are the ones you press them in. But I have this priority keeping in mind the priority system, right? So Rampage might be your fourth most valuable button. However, Rampage guarantees that you're enraged. So, since our first priority is to stay enraged always, even if we have a Crushing Blow or a Bloodbath ready, if we can cast Rampage to re-enrage ourselves, like if we are not enraged at all, which is just your Bloodthirst have a chance to enrage you, but this little bar you see here, but this buff Enrage, if we are not enraged, our number one priority is to be enraged. So even if we're in a situation where we have both our, like, let's say we have Bloodbath available, right? And I have the option to send a Bloodbath or re-enrage myself with Rampage, it is more important to Rampage through our priority system to keep ourselves enraged than it is to send that Bloodbath, even though it's technically higher on the priority system. That's what that means. After that, it's Raging Blow, Bloodthirst, and Execute. And for priority 4, casting Execute at 3 stacks for mark for execution. Because Bladestorm is our highest priority, it does some of the most damage for us in a fight, right? It's very, very valuable. When you're fighting mobs, you will build up these stat marked for execution. You can see them on the mob, you can see them here. I'm currently using Luxtros's Warrior Weakware package that I would recommend you take a look at if you're interested in how my UI looks. But essentially, when we get 3 of these, right? When we get 3 of these Slayer's Marks, it is within our priority system to make sure we're casting Execute to consume these stacks, to make sure we're getting cooldown reduction on our Bladestorm. Every 3 stacks that we consume is 15 seconds of cooldown reduction on our Bladestorm. And that's very, very good. So you have your Bladestorm, so this is the basic gist of it, right? That's the very basic thing, right? You want to stay enraged, use your cooldowns if they won't be wasted, use Crushing Blow and Bloodbath before Rampage, and cast Execute with 3 stacks of Mark for Execution. One thing to note is that the buff you get from your Slayer talent is called Sudden Doom. You do not need Sudden Doom talented to get that effect. I only use this for my single target setup, but if you have something else talented altogether and you do not have Sudden Doom, this will give you a Sudden Doom proc. So if you're playing in pure single target, right, and you're not running Sudden Doom, basically anytime your Sudden Doom pops, because every 3 stacks of Slayer Strikes will give you a Sudden Doom cast, you can just send it if you don't have Sudden Doom cast, or if you don't have Sudden Doom talented, because it means you have Slayers marked 3 times, so it'll basically guarantee the fact that you are getting Sudden Doom, or that you are consuming 3 stacks for your Sudden Doom. There are situations where casting Execute, you can get a Slayer's Mark before, but that's not something you really should need to be worrying about right now for that, like, basic stuff. But now we move over to the advanced things. For the advanced section of single target, this is kind of where we're trying to squeeze a little more efficiency out of the spec, right? And this is what you'll see other players do. So the first one, if you're still in Rage, casting Raging Blow below 110 Rage for additional Slaughtering Strike stacks and Rage efficiency. So every time you cast Raging Blow or Crushing Blow, you get a stack of Slaughtering Strikes. That increases the damage of your next Rampage by 20%. So the class just essentially keeps buffing all of its different abilities within itself. Which is very, very good. So if you see me... So, I'll show you. I don't know why this is doing this. For popple cooldowns, whatever. This generally won't happen while you have Recklessness up, because you generate so much rage that it doesn't matter. But once your Recklessness falls off, which we'll see here, you see I'm at about 97 rage. I could send Rampage here, but instead I will Raging Blow again, just because we have a lot of ways to get Raging Blow charges back through Wrath and Fury, improved Raging Blow, and Hack and Slash. So all we're really doing is within our 130 rage bar, we're just making sure that we do not overcap, so we're not wasting rage. But because we are still in rage, we want to use as many resources as possible. So we'll use our Raging Blow charges, our Bloodthirst, whatever, just to make sure, what's the right word? I don't have the right word for it, but it's basically so that while you're doing this, while you're casting your stuff, whatever, right? It means you're just being a little more efficient with your rage, because if you spend this, you won't overcap, and then you'll be already back down to like 50, 60 rage. It's just using your whole rage bar and just not overcapping rage. That's kind of all it is. I don't really have a great way to describe it, so I apologize. Apologize if that was a little confusing. The other thing for our advanced section as well is dealing with Ashen Juggernat. Ashen Juggernat is a talent we take in the tree that increases the critical strike chance of Execute by 10% every stack. So if we're about to like lose a Slayer, like a charge here, for example, what you can do throughout the fight is, even if you, let's say you don't have 3 stacks of Mark for Execution, if your Slayer Strike buff, like this, if your Ashen Juggernat is about to fall off, it's a damage gain to refresh it to make sure you're keeping Ashen Juggernaut stacks rolling. This may end up having you send executes not when there's, like, for example here. Oh, my Sudden Death fell off, but you get what I mean. It's basically because the amount of damage execute does, you're giving it a lot of crit, is pretty, like, execute is an okay button. But it is simply keeping up that 5 stacks of Ashen Juggernat makes execute a pretty decent button, and you're just going to be using it rotationally anyway. So by keeping the stacks up, anytime you would normally hit Sudden Death to consume Slayer stacks or whatever, it's just a damage gain to making sure that Ashen Juggernat doesn't fall off throughout the duration of a fight. The other thing to note is, for advanced, is if your Bladestorm is within 10 seconds of your cooldowns, hold it and combine them. Bladestorm does a lot of damage, your cooldowns do a lot of damage, right? You want to hold it. However, that comes to our next part here, which is if holding Bladestorm to line up with cooldowns, do not consume mark for execution stacks to get the max cooldown value. So if I'm here in this situation and I get 3 stacks, I want to make sure that I'm Bladestorming before I execute, because I want that 15 seconds of cooldown right back into my Bladestorm so I can get more Bladestorms. It might feel a little weird, but you're not really missing a lot. You're not really losing out a lot. Or you're not losing out at all when you do that. It's just efficient. Excuse me, it's just efficient. But otherwise, that is single target, right? Here's your opener. Here's your priority system. This is your rotational priority, right? If you have nothing else to press, I mean, you can press like slam if you want. I'll even add like whirlwind down here. But realistically, if you follow this right here and don't think about anything else, you'll get into a good flow, a good rhythm of how you're playing the class. You'll be good to go. And then once you want to get a little more out of it, a little extra out of it, you can use these advanced parts. I mean, these technically aren't really like advanced, but in terms of like someone being new to the game to then want to like push their efficiency a little more, that's what I would consider advanced, right? It's just, it's very weird. I'm not used to doing the guides in this way where I have this like little advanced section. Normally I would kind of push everything together. But because of that, we're just trying this out. We'll see if it's good. We'll see if people like it. I'll also have these specs that I have. I'll also have these in the description of the video if you want to copy paste them. Now let's move over to our AoE. And now what's changed here? What's changed? So we're not running Spear. We're running Titan's Torment instead of Berserker's Torment because we are using Odin's Fury. And then mainly here, we do not use Culling Cyclone on AoE. The reason being, if you're fighting 10 targets, having those 10 targets take 1% increased damage from Bladestorm isn't very valuable. But you can take Brutal Finish instead, and what that will do is through your Whirlwind stacks, you'll have your Slaughtering Strikes buff, you'll have your two-piece tier set buffing your Rampage, you'll have a lot of modifiers buffing your Rampage, and it'll make Rampage do a ton of damage in AoE. Which is why we use Brutal Finish in AoE, because it is, the long and short is Brutal Finish is just more damage than Culling Cyclone, right? We're still using Fierce Follow-Through because we actually cast more Bloodthirst in AoE than we do in single target. The reason being is Reap the Storm. Bloodthirst has a 20% chance to cause you to unleash a flurry of steel, striking all nearby enemies. This was also recently buffed with Bloodthirst. Now, the reason why it is so important in AoE to keep our Whirlwind stacks, these stacks here, so all of our hits cleave, every time you hit Bloodthirst, it is a 20% chance per target hit, right? That this Reap the Storm will proc. And this Reap the Storm did 800k and I wasn't even enraged. It does some closer to 1 million on 3 targets. If you're enraged. It does a lot of damage. Reap the Storm can and will do as much damage as your Bladestorm in AoE, if you are prioritizing this, right? So Reap the Storm is one of the reasons why we prioritize Bloodthirst. So let's look at our AoE notes. One thing I did add here as a small caveat, because some people just want to like grab this and like screenshot it, is mainly the fact that we do a ton of burst AoE. The moment we hit like Avatar Roar, we are avatared, we are roared, we are casting an Odin Sphere. We do a crazy amount of burst AoE, and if you hit that burst AoE too quickly, you're just going to pull aggro from the mobs and die. So give your tank a couple globals, then go in. But instead of using Recklessness in our opener like we did for single target, we don't have to do that, because using Recklessness mainly got us to being Enraged, which is once again our #1 goal. But because we're running Titan's Torment, and we're running Odin's Fury, Titanic Rage is Odin's Fury enrages you. So whenever we cast Avatar, our main cooldown, it will also cast an Odin's Fury, and that Odin's Fury will enrage us, which means we do not have to Recklessness going into pulls on AoE. Now, the thing that's really nice about Fury is because of how the spec works, the single target and the AoE are basically the exact same, except for one little exception. All that is that instead of casting Crushing Blow as our primary button, we are casting Bloodbath or Bloodthirst. That is it. And that is just because of Reap the Storm. Because Reap the Storm does a ton of damage. I've already explained it, yada yada. So here's our new priority system. Stay Enraged. Obvious. Use cooldowns if they won't be wasted. Same thing as in single target. If you're an AoE or if you're a Mythic Plus, if all the mobs are about to die and you'll still have half your cooldowns running while you're running to the next pack of mobs, don't send your cooldowns. Wait for the next pack. We want to get full value out of what we're pressing, right? So we don't want to just like send it on nothing, essentially. The next one is, it's worded weird. I don't know how to word this. It's refresh whirlwind stacks if 0 remain. What that means is while you're in AoE, whenever you cast Whirlwind, your next single target ability will do AoE cleave to the next 4 targets near you. So all that really means is once you use all 4 of these stacks of Whirlwind, it means none of your stuff is going to cleave anymore. And obviously, you want to cleave, so just re-Whirlwind and then go back into doing your stuff, whatever. One thing I guess I should have noted in single target as well is one of the reasons why Rampage is very good is because before calculating the damage, Rampage actually enrages you and then does the damage. So even if you're not enraged, you don't have to worry about losing damage when casting Rampage because it pre-enrages you. It pre-enrages you before calculating the damage. It's quite nice. Once again, cast Crushing Blow and Bloodbath before Rampage. Cast Execute with 3 stacks of marked for execution. Now this one is actually no, I'll go into that. I'll put that in the advanced, right? I'll put it in the advanced. We'll go over that in the advanced. But once again, it's literally just like single target, except you're casting Bloodthirst and Bloodbath instead of Crushing Blow first. Some people have said that you might want to focus on... You see this 15% buff that I have right here? Every time I cast a Raging Blow, it increases the crit chance of my next Bloodthirst through this Blood Craze talent. Don't think about that at all. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to care about it. It just happens. It just works in your rotation. You don't have to consider it literally at all. It'll consume itself. It'll build itself up. Don't worry about it. Don't have to track it. Nothing. It doesn't matter. But otherwise, aside from single target, the AoE rotation, like I said, is literally the same thing except Bloodbath. Now, something a little more advanced, I guess, with this is the fact that when you're casting your cooldowns, which I'll show you here, what'll end up happening is your Odin's Fury will start to sync with your Bladestorm. And the reason why that is important is because through Titan's Torment, when we cast Odin's Fury, we get 4 seconds of Avatar. So what that means is we can use that 4 seconds to buff our Bladestorm by 20%, which is a lot of damage in AoE. So we'll go through our rotations like normal. But one thing that is also, that should be noted, I'm trying to get it to work here so you can see. I want it to actually happen so you can see it. That even though I'm attacking my primary target here, when cleaving abilities, these other two targets can get the mark for execution stacks on them. Please happen so I can show in the video. Please do it. Please, game. Don't do this to me. The game is not being nice to me. But basically, while you're cleaving your abilities, the enemy targets that you're near can also be hit by a mark for execution. And they will also gain stacks while you're just doing your stuff. And the reason this is important is because of our consuming mark for execution. Bro, are you gonna do it? Maybe these dummies won't do it. These dummies might be broken. Let me try down here. Yeah, you can see it here, right? So, multiple targets can have stacks of mark for execution on them, right? So you see I have 1 stack here and 2 stacks here. When you cast execution in AoE, it'll consume stacks from both targets, right? Both target stacks were consumed. So one thing you can do, I guess this would be more part of the advanced part, is one thing you can do is whenever your sudden death procs in AoE, it means you've casted 3 mark for executions, and you can just send it in AoE. You also will see that we are getting sudden death procs without sudden doom talented. So, see if I can make it happen here. It is not being nice to me and not actually showing it to me, but when hitting your primary target, you can get stacks of marked for execution on your other targets. But because of how it works, because you get a sudden death proc, every single time you get 3 Slayer strikes, you get sudden death, it means in AoE you can actually just cast sudden death the moment you get it, and you should be consuming at roughly 2 to 3 Slayer strikes every time. It is possible, depending on the mob pack size and density, that kind of thing, that you could be putting a Slayer strike on a mob that you don't hit with your execute because we're capped at 5 targets, but that doesn't really matter. In AoE, if you're just casting execute, when you get that sudden doom proc, you will be consuming the stacks, and you will be getting your cooldown reduction for Bladestorm, which is our highest priority. Sorry, I'll just show you here. Like, the other thing I noted, because Odin's Fury gives us Avatar, it can be a lot of, as far as, like, the more advanced stuff, more of a damage game. If you wait, and then cast Odin's Fury and then Bladestorm, because that means your Bladestorm will be buffed by 20% damage the whole time. I already said that, but I don't know why. I just felt like saying it again, right? But that's kind of it. I feel like I'm kind of trailing out on this, so I'm going to cut the video here pretty quickly. But like I said, I will do a Mountain Thane video by itself, because that's a little more involved and a little different and kind of weird compared to it. But realistically, if you just want to have something to follow that's up to date, this is your single target. And this is your AoE. I do apologize. I feel like I could have explained it a little better, but this should hopefully make a lot of sense. And if you do have questions, feel free to, you can either ping me on like Twitter or Blue Sky, or you can join my Discord and ask questions there, that kind of thing, or in the comments. And I will try to go through those and help people out and answer questions, because I'm honestly kind of bad at this whole guide thing. I'm just trying to do what I can. Right. Anyway, that is that, and I will stop rambling at you because it's already been 30 minutes. Alrighty, bye-bye.